Jumping right into the calendar, I believe we'll look at House Bill number 1. That is House Bill number 359 by Leader Lamberth. We have a motion and a second. Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This bill actually passed this committee last year. It just right sizes the penalty for driving without a license to make it consistent with driving on suspended or revoked. Those are B misdemeanors now. Driving without a license is a C. We would still leave the C misdemeanor on the book for somebody that had a license and just didn't have it on their person at the time. That would still be a C misdemeanor. But if you don't have a license or if you've had it suspended or revoked, it would be a B misdemeanor. Ordinarily, that's a citation. Somebody comes to court and is told to get a license, almost like a fix-it ticket, but the penalty should be all the same for everybody, in my opinion. So that's what the bill does, Mr. Chairman. I stand ready for questions.
Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Madam Clerk, please open the vote board. Has every member voted? Anyone wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you and 14 ayes, 2 nays, 1 present not voting.
Ayes have it. Your bill goes to finance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to item number 2. Turn the page. Chairman Clements, House Bill 16. We have a motion. We have a second. Representative Chairman Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honored to be before you today, and I won't take up too much of your time. I know Commissioner Ely's chomping at the bit to get up here and speak to you. This bill would create the Student Pedestrian Protection Grant Fund. All this bill is doing.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, you have an amendment.
Yes, sir. 3653
3653
was adopted in the subcommittee.
I need a motion second on the amendment. I have a motion and second. All in favor of putting the amendment on the bill, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Now explain the bill as amended, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill creates the Student Pedestrian Protection Grant Fund for the purpose of supplementing local efforts to build sidewalks around our local public schools that are not on state roadways. Last year, in 2024, we had 1,900 accidents involving pedestrians across the state of Tennessee, and unfortunately, we had over 150 deaths in the state of Tennessee involving pedestrians. We want to make sure that our most vulnerable pedestrians, our children walking to and from school, are better protected. And a lot of local governments are trying to build sidewalks. As you know, they're expensive, but we need them around our public schools in both urban and rural areas and suburban areas. And this would just create the fund. It would require further action of this body for any money to go into the fund. But this basically sets up the bank account so that if this body or anybody so chose to put money into that fund, it would be somewhere to receive it. And TDOT would oversee this grant fund.
You've heard the explanation, members. Any questions? Chairman Rudd.
Hello, Leader. Let's see. What is the, do you know what the amended fiscal note is? I don't have it in front of me.
Well, that's the magic of the amendment is there is no fiscal note. That's why we drafted it in such a way that we require further action of this body to put money into the fund. All we're doing is creating the account.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Are we ready to vote? All right. Clerk, please open the voting board. Has every member voted? Anyone wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 16 ayes, 1 nay.
Ayes have it. Your bill goes to government operations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last item on the calendar is item number 3, and that is House Bill 969 by Chairman Hawk. We have a motion and a second. And I believe, Chairman, you have amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is correct. We have amendment drafting code 003980.
3980. Yes, I have that same code. I have a motion. I have a second on the amendment.
Second.
Looking for a second. We have a second motion and a second. All in favor of adding the amendment to the bill, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The amendment's on the bill. Chairman Hawk, please explain the bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. And with a bit of your indulgence, this is going to directly relate to the budget hearing we're going to hear in a few minutes. I brought a file with me from April of 2017 when this plan was first introduced. what we're doing is taking, as amended, we're taking sales tax generated by sale of motor vehicles, new and used cars, and sale of tires across the state of Tennessee. The sale of tires has been an issue that's been adopted by the governor in his proceeding or in his budget presentation, roughly $80 million. And then the sale of motor vehicles, the sales tax collected to go to the transportation fund is going to be roughly another $1 billion, where the governor's budget has put forth $80 million recurring in the sales tax on tires to be part of the budget. It has put in a one-time non-recurring fund of $1 billion to go toward the road transportation fund. I'll call it the transportation fund. I shouldn't say road fund. So y'all can correct me on the language there, but to go toward our transportation needs. And this is not a prop, but I'll remind you, as we heard budget hearings, just general budget hearings, that we have $30 billion of outstanding needs in transportation. And we need to do something to create a recurring fund to help our transportation needs across the state. This is one way to get there. That's a long explanation, Chairman and members, but I certainly ask for an affirmative vote.
Members, you've heard the explanation. Questions for the sponsor? Chairman Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Hawk, the money that we're transferring over to TDOT, that traditional money, where was it going and how has it been replaced?
Chairman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Rudd, thank you for the question. Those dollars are general fund dollars, so they go spread out amongst all different programs and departments throughout the state. And I will mention, just to reiterate, the governor's proposed budget this year has $1 billion of those dollars that are typically general fund dollars that would go toward transportation anyway. What we're doing with this piece of legislation would make that a recurring source of funding for transportation, but it's spread across all departments in the general fund right now at the moment.
Follow up? Any other questions? Question has been called on the bill without objection. Are we ready to vote? Madam Clerk, please open the vote board. Has every member voted? Anyone wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 20 ayes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ayes have it. Your vote, your bill goes to Finance.
Thank you, Chairman and
Thank you.
members.
Members, that concludes our calendar. We're now going to go out of session, and we're going to go into a budget hearing for fiscal year 26 with Department of Transportation. Good to have Commissioner Ely and his executive staff with us today. Commissioner, we'll recognize you first.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, it's an honor to be here with you today, and very much appreciate just the commitment to transportation infrastructure that this committee has met, and so we are very grateful for that. Without the sound financial policies, I think that this committee has represented, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation today, and so we're grateful for that. You know, for a long time, TDOT has kind of been able to eat what we kill, meaning that whatever the gas tax, as Chairman talked about, whatever the gas tax presented and represented is all the amount of money that we had to be able to expend. And so that's worked really well, I would say, for the last 50 years as part of the way we have structured transportation infrastructure funding in Tennessee, because that gas tax in the 60s and 70s and 80s was growing at a rate that not only allowed us to keep up with maintaining the infrastructure assets that we have, but also allowed us to increase that capacity as needed to be able to do that. And so, that's worked really well for us over the last decades. But unfortunately, it's beginning not to be the case anymore. And as Chairman Hawk has pointed out, as well as Chairman Howell, when you think about, we all know now that gas tax revenue stream that we've had is now flat. And Joe will get into that in a little bit, but is now flat. At the same time, the cost of building our roads is going exponentially up from inflation. And so you've got those two things working in contradiction. And then you think about the fact that most of our infrastructure in Tennessee, as in most states, was really laid down in the 60s, 70s, and 80s after the Interstate Act of 1956. And so many of these assets now are aging and have reached the life cycle end of their life. And so that's kind of what we're here today to talk about, and what the governor's presented. When we think about where we're headed, I think that we need to make additional investment. And so let's go ahead to the next slide here. I want to jump right to the point, because I know we're pushed for time, and to say that we're very pleased with the governor's additional support for transportation in this upcoming budget. Of those programmatic, you'll see here what is being funded from the governor's proposed budget, and of the programs that we recommended and proposed back in October in our budget hearing. Everything that we proposed with these either fully funded or partially funded as part of that process. And so I just can't underestimate the significance of being able to tap in and look at us being able to have some general fund ongoing investment into transportation in Tennessee. We've always done exactly what I said earlier about, we've got whatever we're generating from the gas tax, it's not sufficient anymore to take us into the future where we are headed. And so what this is allowing us to do is to invest in these programs of pavement, these programs of bridge investment, these programs of spot safety, to be able to add additional dollars to be able to make a difference in those areas. In addition to that, you'll see down in the expedited projects category, almost $750 million as part of that process. And what this will allow us to do is to expedite projects that are now out there waiting to be allocated. We'll be able to utilize those to reduce our cost and address many of the urgent needs that are out there available to us now. The last thing I would say on this, I'll kind of bring your attention to some of the strangely precise numbers that are there. That's because we had an $80 million investment, as Chairman pointed out, related to the tire, the tire tax generally. And what we have done here is also added to that in non-recurring funds to be able to make up the difference of what we originally proposed for those three areas. And so you'll see in the total category what we're proposing to do there. And so that makes a huge difference. The other thing that we have done very intentionally is, if you look down at Rural Service Patrol and the mowing and litter, we did not use any, those services are recurring. And those are the services that we've heard from many of you that you want to be increased. Mowing, litter, service patrol. Right now, and we'll show this in a minute, right now, we're very limited where that service patrol is. And so what we want to be able to do is continue to expand these programs. And that's what this is showing. But we want to make sure that we're not using non-recurring funds in doing so. And that's where we would utilize some of those funds. And so it's very important that we look at how we can expand. This is not a huge expansion. It is a moderate expansion to be able to continue to provide the services we need for the state of Tennessee. And so I'll now turn it over to Joe or Will. Will's going to jump in now. Joe's going to jump in.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Joe Galbato, Deputy Commissioner, Chief Financial Officer. So you've seen bits of this slide in pieces before, so we want to go through them very quickly for you. The statewide need, as you remember in the TMA, we were asking, what Tasser had put back was about $30 billion. As you can see, that continues to rise every single year, and it will continue to rise in the future. We've also updated the annual program and the new construction for the rolling 5-year average. Again, the annual program are the amount of contracts that we let every year. So you can see from the slide, of that, the subset of the 1.3 billion is the 600 million in construction. But in addition to that, you've got another approximately $514 million that goes toward resurfacing, that goes through bridge repair, bridge replacement. And so roughly 85% of all of the funds that we send out in that contract go out in those different categories. The remaining things are things that Will has to do for slide mitigation, rockfall mitigation, mowing, litter, et cetera.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity today. Committee, it's great to be here. Want to talk about one of the things that you will see as a theme today in our presentation. That is really focusing on the state of the assets that we already have. Our two largest assets are our pavements and bridges. And one of the things you will see here is a focus on ensuring that we keep those assets in good condition. The longer they go without attention, the more it costs to fix them when they do fail. So I'd first draw your attention to the graph on the top right of the screen there. That's a visual depiction of the age of our bridges in Tennessee. We have over 20,000 bridges in Tennessee. 8,400 of those are owned by the department. The balance of that are local bridges, but we also inspect those. We have a responsibility to inspect those through the federal program. But the point I want you to see here is that the majority of the bridges, which is the bar in the center of the graph, were built in the 60s. So what you see in blue there is the national average, and what you see is in red is the state of Tennessee bridges by age. So we're right on the national average. The key thing here is we design bridges for a design life of approximately 75 years. So if the majority of our bridges, and it's actually 48% of our bridges, were built in the 60s, you can do the math and understand that the bill is beginning to come due. These are aging assets that we must take care of before they cost so much that they have to be replaced. Going on to our second largest asset, which is our pavements, bottom right. What this graph depicts is the quality. We measure the quality of our interstates and state routes. You will notice that this graph goes back to 2012, and you will see a steady decline in the condition of those pavements up until this past year, 2024. We have a target in our asset management plan for both our interstate pavements as well as our state routes. Our target for our interstates is 50%. The target for our state routes is 45. You will see there in that graph that we are dangerously close to flirting with the percentage of those in good condition. And as I said earlier, the issue that brings upon us is those are things that we want to fix first. I've said it many times, and I'll continue to use the analogy that we don't, from our standpoint, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put in a pool at your house if your house needs to be painted.
Let me jump in here to the next slide. And just so we all know, we've got a lot of great things going on in Tennessee. We know that we're one of the most moved to states and that everybody wants to come to Tennessee. And What we did here just to show us is kind of to be able to look at how we compare to our peer states. We compare ourselves a lot of times to Texas and in Florida. And what you see here is that from a percentage of overall budget, we're spending about half of the percentage of overall budget in transportation as Texas and Florida is currently in their state budgets. And so we just wanted you to know how we compare and how we are continuing to be able to measure up against that. Also, it's important to understand when we're looking at overall transportation spending in our ranking, we're ranking about 31st in fuel tax now, not the highest, not the lowest, which is good. But it's important that we continue to be able to look at how we are currently doing. We know that we do not have many of the measures that some of the other states have. We're not bonding a single dollar of infrastructure or transportation infrastructure spending. We're also do not have indexing in the gas tax like some of our other states do, and so these are measures that we continue to measure and come into play. And as we look at it, we feel pretty good about what we're able to accomplish with the dollars that we have, because we're continuing to measure up there with those states in being able to accomplish the same goals as what we're trying to do as part of that process. And we're going to continue to make sure that we spend our dollars as wisely as possible and that we're able to get the bang for the buck out of every dollar that we spend in Tennessee. Joe.
All right, we'll go to the financial slides. First thing we want to look at is our revenue. So we are funded with federal, state, and local revenues. On the federal side, we receive federal dollars from federal transit, federal aviation, and federal highway, which is the preponderance of our federal revenue. We are under the 5-year Surface Transportation Bill in Washington, the IIJA, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And so that bill expires in 2026. And so what we've done is we've posted the numbers here. When you look at this, and I brought this up year to year, as you progress through the IIJA in Tennessee, we go up about $20 million per year. This specific year for federal highway, it's $24 million, which is the preponderance of the variance. There are some other movements between FTA, FAA, but again, this is the major variance. On the state side, pretty easy to understand. We have the $1 billion increase, non-recurring. We have the 80 million increase recurring, and then there was a reduction to the Transportation Equity Fund of about $11 million. What I think that happened there is the funding board, again, the Transportation Equity Fund provides our funds from air, rail, and water. And so the major portion of that is the air side. The air side, the cap that one person can pay on aviation fuel tax was $3 million in 2024. It has now gone to $1 million in 2025 and going forward. And I think that's the adjustment that the funding board has made. On the local side, again, that's their share of any state or federal project. So the right side is the one that I'd like to talk about every year, because this confirms exactly what we've been saying year after year after year. Our revenues are slowing, and at this point, now they've stopped. They're not growing anymore. You can see in fiscal 21, we were up 4%. Fiscal 22, we were up 4%. But now we're at basically treading water at this point. And I'll call your attention, these are all actual collections. So if you look at fiscal 22, 23, and 24, you can see just how constant it is. So gas, about 530 million. Diesel, about 235. The special petroleum, about 39. And then the vehicle registration, about 310. You'll notice in 2023 that decrease. Remember, this body had a 1-year tax holiday on the vehicle registration. So this represents collections. You all kept us whole with a general fund infusion to keep us flat. So if I adjust for that, that in 2023, the $1,019 is really $1,113. So as you progress from 1,112 to 1,113 to 1,118, again, there's no growth. Now, for fiscal 25, interestingly enough, up until yesterday, the year-to-date collections were only up about 1 to 2 million. At this point, they're up about 10 million. So must have been some fuel that went into the state in the last couple of days. So we think we're going to be okay for fiscal 25 at this point. All right, so this slide depicts just what, again, is a carryover from the previous slide. The top line represents those flat revenues, the 1.1 billion per year. But since 2022, there's some things that have happened to us. So if you've got flat revenues, some costs are going up. So the costs that we have to pay to match the federal, to draw down all of our federal funds, up a little over $30 million. The funds that we are paying to supply for all of our salaries and benefits is up a little over $70 million. So again, with flat revenues, those two costs up $100 million means that we have $100 million less to do other things, whether it's projects, whether it's maintenance, et cetera. Now, exacerbating that fact, as the commissioner and everyone has pointed out, is inflation. And so we've got a graph on the right side of some specific things, but what I look at as the CFO, I look from the United States Department of Transportation. I think it's called the National Highway Construction Cost Index. And if you look at that, the compounded annual growth per year for the last 5 years is 11% per year. So again, it is a real problem for obviously our department and especially Will and his people.
Good morning. Preston Elliott, Deputy Commissioner, Chief of Planning. Appreciate the opportunity to be before you this morning. I want to draw you back to some comments that Will mentioned early on about our assets, talking about pavement and bridge, and focus on one thing here specifically. I know in years past we talked to you about congestion in general, but I want to focus on the graph that you see here, which is the long haul truck traffic and tonnage. We undertake numerous plans across the state, and whether we're talking about specific modes. And the one that we've keyed in on this year is the truck traffic. And it's a good thing because it's a sign of the economy, a good sign of the economy of goods moving and production and then consumption. The bad side of that is that these vehicles tend to weigh more and have a little bit more impact on our infrastructure than just normal vehicles. So what the graphs depict is about a 54% increase in the next 25 years in terms of tonnage of commodities on our roadways. I want to also highlight that just this month, the American Transportation Research Institute published their annual report of the top 100 truck bottleneck locations across the country. And the state of Tennessee, unfortunately, has 7 locations in our state, actually putting us in the top 4 across the country. Other states that have just as high or higher are the states of Texas, Georgia, and California. So we're just behind those states in terms of bottlenecks in our state. And so just want to highlight this particular impact to our transportation infrastructure and to kind of reiterate the importance of the conversation around state of good repair.
All right, so what we'll do now, we'll start going through our recurring requests here, and I'll cover 4 of these and then ask Preston and Joe to chime in on a couple of them. The first one I want to highlight is pavement preservation. Our request is an additional $16 million in recurring dollars for pavement preservation. This would allow us to add 150 additional lane miles as far as preservation is concerned, and again, going to that state of good repair. Also, next would be bridge preservation. 16 million there would allow us to address another 700,000 square feet of bridge deck. So what we do there is one of the most best bang for your buck, if you will, treatments is we we go in and seal all of our bridge decks. Bridge decks, when we look at their condition, or excuse me, bridges in general, we look at three things: the deck, the superstructure, and the substructure. The deck is what would make sense is one of the first things to go. It's exposed to weather, salt, all of those things. We seal those decks. We see a tremendous amount of lifespan increase in the condition of our bridges. So that money would be dedicated to preserving bridges already on our system. The third thing on the top there would be mowing and litter. This $6 million recurring request would go to add an additional cycle for mowing and litter on our state routes, and then keep the same number of cycles for mowing and litter on our interstates. I would point out that one of the things that we had to do last year because of budget concerns, we actually had to cut a cycle because the dollars were running so tight on our interstates. We actually got a little bit lucky in one sense, as far as our budget's concerned, not for our farmers across Tennessee, in the fact that we had a drought. That allowed us to not be hurt so bad, frankly, by the fact that we couldn't do an additional mowing cycle on the interstate. Going forward, we likely won't have that, so that will address that. The last thing that I'll mention is in the center on the bottom, and the commissioner mentioned this already in Rural Service Patrol. If you'll notice in that graphic, you'll see some green around the urban areas. That depicts the coverage of our current HELP program, which is arguably one of the most successful programs in the history of the department, roadside assistance as well as managing incidents. You can see by what's in red, there's a tremendous amount of rural interstate in Tennessee that currently doesn't have coverage. One of the reasons that's important, one of the many reasons, is when incidents happen on those rural interstates, there's a significant level of severity to those crashes. It makes sense, right? The speeds are usually higher. There's also an increase in the amount of time it takes to get those folks to medical care when we do have those incidents. We feel like this Rural Service Patrol will not only address being able to have coverage there, those current incidents today are handled by our maintenance staff, which that maintenance staff, it takes them away from other activities when we have those issues on rural interstates. We see this as a very valuable tool that, should we be able to have it, would greatly enhance the experience of folks traveling in Tennessee. Preston.
I'll draw your attention to the bottom left corner there. It's just spot safety. The department currently has a safety program. It is our federal safety program. The problem is that those funds have a lot of limitations and often require it to be a problem before we can address it, meaning that we have to look at historical crash data. Our spot safety program we've had in place has been funded at about $1 million prior to TMA. And when the TMA was put in place, we upped it to $2 million per region. So we went from 4 to 8 million. This is an opportunity for us to address safety concerns before they become a safety problem. So allowing us to really target areas that are not typically eligible for our federal program. And the 13 million combined with the 8, roughly 13, would give us 20 million. So would add a significant investment in addressing our known and safety concerns and safety problems.
And then on the last lower right side, I wanted to bring up as a follow-up from my previous talk. So since 2022, we have had over $70 million of increases to our salaries, which is fantastic. Helps us reduce our turnover rate. Our turnover rate a couple years ago was 18%. Now it's down to 7%. So we feel very good about that. But at the same time, I think a lot of people were surprised to find out that TDOT is unlike all the other departments, that when an increase comes from DOHR, we absorb that as part of our fees. We do not get an influx of general fund money. And so thus we wanted to put some of the recurring funds toward last year's increases that we had.
Okay, so if we could flip over, let's start with our non-recurring requests here. Again, first, sticking with the State of Good Repair theme, we would take 109 million of those non-recurring dollars and advance approximately 47 paving projects that we already have in our 3-year pavement program. Next, on the bridge side, we would use $59 million to advance approximately 15 to 18 of the bridge projects, again, that we already have in our bridge program.
And on the safety, it's as I mentioned earlier about our safety program, this would allow us to hit a backlog right off the bat, so to speak. Do you want me to also cover the? Yeah. So on the last slide to the bottom there, you'll see about the state infrastructure infrastructure fund, excuse me. So in 2023, as part of the 10-year plan, we undertook what is called the statewide partnership program, and communities that you represent submitted projects that they have either committed with local funds or federal funds. This program, by having an infrastructure bank, would allow them opportunity to leverage their dollars on low interest loans through having a $50 million set up for that non-reoccurring kind of a revolving component to give them the ability to advance projects.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll speed through these last couple of slides just to allow for as much time for questions as we can. The bulk of the dollars are the $775 million in recurring project investment, and so what we're saying here is that we recognize one of the biggest things we hear from you is, "Where's my project?" I mean, and what we recognize is that we want to be able to build these projects as quickly as possible, but at the same time recognize that we've got the funds available to do that when we start. And so what this would allow us to do is to expedite some of the projects that are in the 10-year plan, to be able to move them left in the process, as well as looking at things that have potentially happened in the last, since the Improve Act, that might need to be done ahead of some project that is there that you are telling us, don't do this instead. And then the leveraging the statewide partnerships. We got more and more local governments that want to participate. Part of the TMA was to help them leverage their dollars to where we could speed them up in the process of building projects faster. And so that's what these dollars will go to. And then finally, the last thing is just kind of timeline. We have been very intentional, and we never want to presuppose what the legislature wants to spend these dollars on. And so we have said that we know we've got the backlog. You know we have the backlog. And what we have already done is the brain damage or the homework during the TMA to say, here are the projects that are out there. And we know that there are some other needed projects. And so as soon as we get through the budget process, we are ready in April, May to do the deep dive into being able to look at that 775 and come back to you with a detailed summary of what those dollars will be spent on, so that you know where every dollar is going as part of that process. And then that'll move through the process in the rest of this year to be able to expedite that process. So I would just summarize from everything that we've said here to say, you know, we are moving more and more as a department that is moving toward performance-based, to where when we spend these dollars, whether it's on adding dollars to the help trucks, adding for litter or mowing, you know the performance level that you are getting as a part of that process. And so that's a big part of what we're trying to do. The other thing that is everybody's laid out here is an asset management approach to what we're trying to accomplish, to where we know that we are spending every dollar we have at the right place at the right time to be able to increase the life of that asset. And that's our job, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. And then lastly, I would say the philosophy of what we start, we finish. And so what you're seeing with the dollars that we've laid out is we know that when we start a project, then we have identified the dollars to be able to complete that project. And that is allowing us to be able to finish projects much more quickly than we have in the past. So thank you very much for the time today to present before you, and we stand ready to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Very concise, in-depth look at the budget for TDOT, and I appreciate you and your staff for this, and appreciate the leadership that you've provided. You've had some real challenges in the last 12 months with Hurricane Helene and all the other issues that you don't normally deal with, and I think it's very admirable what you've accomplished. While the members are getting their questions together and getting on the list, let me just say that I think the infrastructure fund that I think Preston mentioned, I think that's a brilliant idea. Many of the rural areas of Tennessee, the counties, they get no county dollars. They get no funding locally. All they have is state share. And they're desperately looking for ways to participate. And I think it's a great idea, and appreciate you presenting that idea. We have a list of folks who'd like to ask a question. Chairman Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you explain to the committee, because a lot of them don't know and some are new, exactly the difference between in what we spend and we help out in legal obligations of state bridges and local bridges, and how much we're spending? Because in the past, we've helped them with local bridges, even though it wasn't our legal responsibility to do so. Could you kind of break down your numbers about what we're spending on local and state bridges and explain to the committee what we have to do and what we choose to do?
Great question.
First off, I'll speak to the responsibility in terms of the engineering side. I'll let Preston speak to some of the funding, and then if we need to get legal to answer the other part of your question, we can do that. As I mentioned earlier, over 20,000 bridges in Tennessee, 8,400 of those are owned by the state of Tennessee. The balance of those are still required to be inspected by the state of Tennessee with regard to the federal program. So not only do we provide inspection of those, in many cases, we provide technical support to those locals as far as should a bridge need to be replaced or repaired. As far as the funding, I'll let Preston speak to that.
Yeah, I was going to say a little bit of Joe is going to need to help me out on this, but I want to talk about the state aid program, because a portion of the state aid funds can be used for off-system bridges. And so as you're aware, as part of the TMA, you put up $300 million. And I'm happy to say that the counties have put to good use of that money. About almost 80% is already either complete or under contract. We've had a few that have converted some of theirs on their state aid routes to bridges for off-system, but Joe probably speak better to the actual dollar amounts.
Yes, so for the state aid bridge program, it's about $9.5 million per year that they can use in the different counties. But in the last 2 years, our bridge repair costs are almost exactly the same, $76.5 million and $77.6 million for bridge repair every year. So it's a pretty consistent number every year.
I would like to add, just as a matter of scale, we find that the locals have very similar issues to what we have, just on a smaller scale. And what I'm talking about is when bridges are in need of significant repair or replacement, the level that we're currently funding them at is woefully low. In other words, to replace a run-of-the-mill bridge, you're talking $20 to $30 million. Okay, now bridges vary a lot. I'm using an average here. That being able to come up with that kind of money at the county level, we struggle with it ourselves at the state level. So it is that's why I'm putting so much emphasis on the need to preserve those bridges where we can. And that's also one of the reasons that the age of those assets currently is so critical in our eyes.
That's fine, thank
Vice Chairman Butler.
Thank you. That was an excellent question, Chairman Rudd. Kind of led to where I was going with my question. Is we do get some money from the state to help with our local bridges, and it is woefully low on what it should be. And this is where the challenges I see. We had a bridge that was damaged last year due to flooding, and the cost to replace that bridge after it had been inspected, determined it had to be replaced, was $750,000, which in your analogy is a cheap bridge. However, for a small county, that ate up the entire bridge fund that we had. So that means the bridges that were on the list to be replaced next in line get pushed further down the list, which goes to your point. If the longer it goes to be repaired or replaced, the worse it gets. So what can we do to help our small, especially our rural counties? And it's not just the rural counties, it's all of our counties, all of our road departments. We've got to do something to fund our local road departments to address these bridges. I mean, you just made a comment that the state struggles, the counties are struggling, I think in some cases even worse.
Thank you, Chairman Rudd. No, Butler. Thank you for that question. I think that you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, as Will pointed out, we're struggling to meet our state obligations. Our counties and locals are struggling to meet their obligations as well. And we certainly have recognized this in Upper East in the last few months as part of that process. And so I think it's a combination of things. I mean, the state aid program that we did through the TMA, where we had been traditionally doing 20 million, we did 300 million that y'all approved, that we were able to push out to states. That, as Preston said, we've already spent 80% of that. We didn't know when we started that process we were going to be able to spend it as expeditiously as possible, which is what's happening. But I mean, we could put more dollars into that state aid program that helps our counties. But I mean, we do all have to recognize that everything about this presentation today talks about the need that is out there for us to be able to invest in being able to move forward. And so we've got the same need for the investment of our counties throughout the state as part of that process. And so I think we all need to be thinking in that same process, the importance of infrastructure and how we invest in that in the future, both at a local, county, and state level.
Follow up?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm wondering if in the future we need to dedicate some of the local revenue that's collected, not charging any additional tax, because I don't want to do that, but dedicating some of that local tax revenue to infrastructure in those counties. Right now, the state aid money, and we appreciate all the help that we get from the state and the state aid money. And I can speak to the TMA money that was used across my district. It was used wisely. We got lots of roads that were in desperate need of paving paved. And so I know our county road superintendents did a fantastic job managing that. But we've got to come up with some other funding mechanism, as we had a bill earlier, looking to address those revenue sources locally. And so I wonder if that wouldn't be our best avenue, is to leave some of that money that they're collecting on a local level at the local level to dedicate to infrastructure, roads, bridges, et cetera. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you guys being here and for everything you do every day. One of the questions I get quite often is about the methods, I guess, that are being employed sometimes, and especially in paving. And that's not my department, as many of you know. But one of the concerns that just came up recently that I've asked some questions about involves OGFC. And it looks to me like, just outside looking in, that this was sort of an experimental product that we might work, might not work, and it doesn't appear that it's worth the investment to me from the standpoint of how quickly that has to be replaced. And I've got a stretch in Jackson that on the interstate that's literally 5 years old and it's coming apart. And thinking of the cost of just shutting interstate lanes down, and moving traffic over, and going through the motions of mobilization to just pave that, plus the cost of materials, that's not sustainable to do that every 5 years. So I'm curious about that as a process. Have we determined as a department that this is not something that works in Tennessee? I'd just like to know the status of that. And then secondly, similarly related to maintenance, you mentioned some of the preventive maintenance that you can do. I don't really see actively a lot of crack sealing in our state. And it looks to me like, and you can tell me what the professional assessment is, but it looks to me like that would be a very low cost comparatively method of preventing the disruption of that pavement over a period of time and making that pavement last longer. I'm talking about traditional pavement, not the OGFC. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. And I'll start out, and Will, the engineer, will, I'm sure, correct me. But we are constantly looking at technology in asphalt that performs better and tries to deliver more bang for the buck. And so that's a portion of what we're trying to do. We'll continue to do that. In some cases, it's working great. In some cases, you're seeing some of the deterioration that you're talking about. And then on crack seal, I mean, I'm a big believer in crack seal because it doesn't look so good if you're driving down there the road sometimes, but it is extending the life of these pavements so that we don't have to continue to come back and put a new surface over there. And so just rest assured that is high on our list as we are looking at our asset management process in every single asset feature that we do. Will?
So first, let me address the OGFC. One of the things about OGFC is this is probably the second round of Tennessee's real use of OGFC widely. We used it almost a decade ago when the technology first came out. We quickly went away from it because it did ravel more. Now, what I will say is one of the biggest things that impacts OGFC is winter weather. The last two winters have played havoc with our pavements. Prior to that, we got compliments all the time about OGFC. And the reasons we got compliments is because it is proven to reduce wet weather crashes. And frankly, it rains a lot more than it snows. So there is a trade-off discussion to be had about the safety benefits of OGFC versus the risk of it tearing up due to winter weather. So one of the things that we've done to address that is we actually redid our winter operations SOG, our standard operating guidelines this past year to try and take some of the pressure off of our interstates in the form of the amount we put plows on them. Because plows and OGFC and striping do not mix. So to answer your question, it is a constant trade-off discussion. We are always looking for the best thing. But again, when it comes to wet weather crashes, there is no doubt the data shows that OGFC is a good product. We have other stretches where we've gotten 12 years out of that. So that said, it's also a very temperamental mix to lay. Construction has to be done. The inspection has to be proper. There are a lot of factors that go into that, but to just reinforce the commissioner's point, we are always looking for ways that we can increase pavement life or get better results out of what we have, which leads me to your second point, which I'm glad you brought it up because it's one of the things we have been really pushing and highlighting with our staff, and that is crack sealing. Some folks don't like the way it looks, but I can tell you the numbers do not lie. It is a very effective method when it comes to extending the life of pavements.
Thank you. Speaker Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you all showed in one of your slides that fuel tax collections are basically flat. and costs have really gone up. What if we had indexed the tax back in 17 or maybe even before that? Would that have caught up with what our expenses are now? I know a lot of other states around us have indexed fuel taxes.
Pretty much all the states around us have indexed, and it makes a big difference, obviously, in being able to keep up. I'm not going to say it would keep up totally with because as y'all remember, there was a request that was higher than what we ended up approving, and therefore that index would not have accelerated quite as much, but it would make a big difference, and that's the reason I'm thankful that when we looked at how we dealt with parity on the electric vehicles in the TMA, that we did put indexing as part of that process, and so from a long-term standpoint, that is a positive step. But I would, you got some, all right, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add on. So Speaker, when we were looking at the Improve Act back in 2017, so the analysis we did was, had we indexed originally back in 1990 when we last did the gas tax, we would have taken gas up 18 cents. It would have done by indexing, and diesel would have gone up by 14 cents. So to what Commissioner said, it is a powerful tool to have the indexing moving forward. I don't have the statistics as to what it's been and since the Improve Act, but again, when we were talking about the Improve Act, that 18 cents was what it would have done had we indexed way back then.
So we've more than absorbed, that cost increase since that time. So.
Thank you. Representative Sherrill.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, and all your group that works together for us in Tennessee. And, we can't say enough to say how much we appreciate y'all. I'm glad I live in Tennessee because our roads are better than some of the other states that we cross over to go somewhere. So I know that we have TDOT workers out there and contractors that has a dangerous job out there trying to keep our roads up. And I know we've lost some people out there that's worked for us to keep our roads good. And we can't say enough to say how much we do appreciate you. I know that Representative Todd talked a little bit about the paving. This is something that, and correct me, I want to say this in a nice way. I wonder about our paving. Have we changed the way that we pave in the last, say, 20 years, maybe? That the paving that's put out there, is it thinner now than it was 20 years ago? Maybe because of the cost. I know there's different kinds. I've been told, I say it this way, I've been told that there is different kinds of paving that you put on roads depending on the road condition or weather and all this stuff. And I have, of course, adding this to this, the brine that we put on the road today versus years ago that we used to just put salt on the road. Is this brine, things that's in the brine that you're putting with brine, is it eating up our roads more today than the salt did years ago? I have a 2005 GMC pickup. I don't have a new truck. I've done put 2 sets of brake lines on it because of my opinion and what I've been told from mechanics. This brine is eating up our roads and our vehicles. Is that true? Please, appreciate it.
So I'll answer the second question first. The fact is we're putting more out there. We're being more aggressive with what we're putting out there in terms of brine and salt than we used to. Okay, so we're aggressively trying to get snow off the road. So you probably are seeing an increase in that. However, as far as the pavements are concerned, I would say there's very little impact to those, with one large exception, and that is our bridge decks. When bridge decks have steel in them, they're reinforced concrete. When you get a crack in a bridge deck, water gets in, salt gets in, it corrodes steel. That's why one of the reasons all of our new structures, we use epoxy coated rebar. There are still a lot of, which is basically a coating that keeps that steel from deteriorating. A lot of our old structures did not have that. that goes back to one of the reasons we want to seal our bridge decks and make sure that we seal those off. So I'd like to address your first question. The answer is, are we doing anything different than we used to? We're paving less. We're paving less lane miles. That's a big part of our issue. We're paving less lane miles and we're not putting as much structure in pavement. And what I mean by that is when we go and do a mill and fill, we mill off 1.25 inches of surface mix and we go and put that back. You're basically getting two things out of that. You're getting a good ride and you're sealing off that pavement. If there are structural issues within the structural layer of that pavement below that first layer of asphalt and you're not dealing with those, then the problems are going to reflect through over time. It is simply a function of math. You've got to address more lane miles and address more layers of pavement. There has to be discussion around the investment in those.
Follow up?
Again, thank you very much to TDOT. I appreciate you very much. I know when I come into Nashville, there's sections of road. When I come in, the road is rough and it was probably paved last year. I come out of Nashville and there's sections of road that's rough that I drive on coming out that was paved last year. So I'm wondering, is our paving not holding up? Not trying to bash anybody or anything like that. I'm just saying, is there something that we're doing today that we wasn't doing before? It seems like the roads are not holding up, our paving not as good as they used to maybe.
Typically what you're seeing, and I know some of the areas you're talking about because I know the way you're going home, is we go in there and put patches in. And frankly, they just, patches don't last, especially right now, this time of year. Just so everybody knows, a lot of what we're putting in the holes that are out there now is cold mix, which is a temporary fix. We can't fix those until enough plants are running and we can get hot mix to fix them right. But honestly, it's a combination of several things. You're trying to, for lack of a better description, limp that section of pavement along until you can afford to pave it next season to have the dollars to do it. So you're trying to put a Band-Aid on that to get a little bit more time out of it. And these potholes don't get better. They continue to get worse. As soon as water gets in, that is the number one thing that we watch for in our pavements. The minute water gets in, we had the last 2 weeks where we had all those rains and then the snow and freezing temperatures behind them. Water gets in there, they freeze, they pop out, they become bigger. We're sending crews out there again to fill them. What we need to be able to do is go down and basically treat the disease, not the symptom.
Follow up?
Again, thank you. Appreciate it. And probably too, 20 years ago, our traffic was probably half what it is today. So that's probably another problem that we have that we're trying to dissolve. But anyway, thank you very much for all that TDOT does for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Representative Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, members of the staff, executive staff. Thank you for the work you're doing. This past year has been a challenging year. Obviously, we gave you the instructions a while back to launch TMA. We also had the hurricane and the response, which was phenomenal. We've all seen the work that was done in a very short time, 150, 160 days, but also the amount of work that still has to be done. We also diverted a lot of TDOT's key people from other regions to help up in the Northeast. So we do appreciate that. Chairman Marsh talked about indexing. I think it would have helped us keep up with the rising costs when you look at those escalation in materials across the board that you can't forecast this in the future. So I think it's something we're going to have to look at. I noticed you did address mowing and litter and rural service patrols. This is one of the things next to congestion and potholes that people do appreciate and want to talk about TDOT's work. Reiterate for me again exactly what you're going to do on the mowing side, because this is a visible indication of our commitment to the attention to detail on our roads, especially on our interstates, whether it's 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and then also the visibility of our rural service patrol. Those two-part question.
We're adding an additional litter and mowing on all of the surfaces that we're doing. Yeah, all of our state routes that we're doing, not just on the interstates, but all of our state routes as part of that process. And so, and then on the help truck side, I don't know if we can go back to that, but you'll see on the far right side, the green areas are the areas that currently have our help truck services, and we're looking at adding those to the other areas in the more rural areas. And so it's a huge add-on to what we're doing now.
I would also just add couple of points. In addition to the mowing cycles on the interstates and the state routes, we also fund city and county maintenance agreements across the state out of our routine maintenance budget that supplement that. The other thing I would mention is one of the other things we fund out of our routine maintenance budgets that is a critical piece to mowing and litter is our vegetation management. Having a real herbicide program and being able to manage that it really is a force multiplier when it comes to mowing and litter.
Follow up?
I would just say the vegetation management and mowing really do not only aesthetically look better, but from a safety perspective, wildlife along the interstate and secondary roads is real important. And accidents have greatly increased across the state with more traffic and the amount of congestion. Our service patrol is really helping move that traffic when we do have bottlenecks. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner and team. We've had a lot to talk about the last few weeks in this committee, and I really thank you so much. Hopefully you can sense and tell from the vote we took earlier on House Bill 969 that you had this committee at hello. To coin the phrase from one of my movies and my old country music star I went to college with at ETSU, we want to do something. And I'm hopeful that we can get our finance committees on board and recognize the dire need. And as Chairman Howell and I have had several conversations, we're looking at diversifying the revenue stream. As we look on slide 5 that you all put up, the state user fee collections and how we flattened out. I think it's slide 5. There it is, yes. The way revenues are flattened out, we're trying to come up with some innovative ways to bring more funds there. And as some of my colleagues have talked about indexing, if we can tap into the sales tax, and we had heard 8 years ago when the Approve Act came about, it's all about user fee. So we've got the concept of sales tax on vehicles. If you're buying a vehicle, you're using a vehicle, it's a user fee. For buying tires or going on the road, it's a user fee. But if we can even use some innovation of a percentage of sales tax, and that's some questions that come up in this committee earlier, if it's a percentage of sales tax, we're open to whatever that idea may be to create some type of sum sufficient that we can help offset these numbers that are on this slide right here and really catch us up. We're at a critical point where we're even having to put off maintenance. As Will said earlier, we're falling behind on maintenance, not to mention all the new projects that we've got to do. So we've got to do something, and the billions of dollars of needs are there. I want to back up. There is a question here. As we're looking at the federal funds that are on this particular slide, does an increase in state revenue allow us to draw down any more federal revenue, or is that a set dollar figure because of our population, because of our size?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, we can't draw down any more. We have a certain amount of what's called apportionment that comes to us every year. And we have a certain spending authority against that apportionment. So if we have more state funds, it would allow us to do more things with state funds, but not draw down any more federal apportionment.
Well, I will say that we're in active conversations with federal USDOT now. There are a lot of programs and grant programs that are out there today that are discretionary, that we are trying all of us to work together with our partner states to get more of those tax dollars spent moving to the states to start with, as opposed to going to Washington and then us having to apply for them in different ways, shapes, or form. And so we're looking at how we can initially get those dollars pushed to the states so that we can determine, you can determine how best to spend those dollars for the state, as opposed to them being discretionary across the federal government. Yeah, by formula, as Joe's pointing out. So.
Yeah, I would like to pile on a little bit to that question, because there is a way that it makes a big difference. And for us, it came in the form of $1 billion bridge in Memphis. I should have said this earlier. I'm sorry that I didn't. I want to thank this body for passing the TMA, because without those funds, we would be in even more dire straits than we are as far as funding transportation. I can't thank this group enough for and the governor for doing that. It's one of the things our pavement condition and all these things that have been brought up are something that I think about and keep me up at night. So I really appreciate that. But having those state funds on hand put us in a position with a discretionary grant through the federal government that we had the cash on hand to make our match. That was only a 50% grant. Because we had that money, it made an attractive grant package for us. So there are ways that it makes a difference. And in that case, it was leveraging. And we do appreciate the ability to have those dollars.
Follow up?
And thank you. And understanding the formula that is in the federal plan, to hear Commissioner Wilt, to hear you reinforce that having those dollars available at the state level are very important as we move forward for projects just like that. And again, I'll go back to what we were able to do in Northeast Tennessee with those Modernization Act funds as well. It was the right money at the right time, and we're going to need this for decades to come. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Members, we have about 8 minutes left. Some of us have to get to another committee, so we've got time for about 3 more questions. If you would, please make it as quickly as possible. Representative Towns, you're recognized, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As always, gentlemen, thank you for your presentations. It's like watching a jigsaw puzzle sometime as it relates to how the money in transportation is operating, but it's very interesting as always. I got a couple of questions as well. Y'all know where I am with a third bridge with Memphis, not the one that's being repaired and done, but a third bridge. But thank you for what you're doing there, because that side of the country needs it as well. That side of Tennessee needs it as well. But in the event that there's an earthquake, we've had the storms, that's a lot of cleanup and some repair. Are we prepared if there's an earthquake in some part of the state to be able to go in and do what's necessary to make those areas whole in a short order?
Let me jump in, because we deal with our partner with TEMA and Director Sheehan on a constant basis in preparation for any kind of major seismic event. And so I would say, yes, we're continually working with our emergency management resources to be able to do that. I mean, we'll mention the I-55 bridge. I mean, one of the primary reasons that we were able to get that funding and that we supported that funding is that we will be able, when we build that bridge, to seismically retrofit that I-55 bridge, which is not so now. And so that will help us solve a huge problem for that Memphis bridge and part of that process.
Yes, follow up?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. Hopefully everything in the future, will be that way. 20,000 bridges. We're dealing with 8,400 directly. The rest of them across the state. When you are purchasing services, are we able to get that service at the best going rate out there, competitive rate? Are you able to get the best rate for the services that you're paying for. Many times people like to charge the government, overcharge the
Yeah.
government. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that we're getting a good bang for our buck. We've got great partners with our road builders in Tennessee.
Okay.
Long history there, and so I feel like we're getting a good return for what we're accomplishing. It's always on us to be able to deliver the best product, for us to design the best product for our citizens in the state, and continue to help our locals as much as possible in the process.
Follow up?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. And that's where I was going with the locals. The locals, that other 11,000.7 or whatever it is, if they were able to take advantage of what it is you all have as leverage in terms of costs, hopefully we could save that money, and then a percentage of that money could come back to the coffers that you all have, as well as they could split the savings. I don't know how much of that is happening, but I'm just suggesting something to look into, because obviously we got to have new revenue, and we got to have lots of it, and we got to have it for a long time. But if our buying power gets to a point where we're utilizing, helping those locals, not managing, but just helping them buy and pay for the stuff at your cost rate,
Yeah,
that may save some money. I don't know. Mr.
I
Chairman,
agree. You want to comment on that?
Representative Davis. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I'll just be very quickly. When you talked about the spot safety program, can you kind of give some examples of that? And then I know that Chairman Vital talked about the help and expanding that program. Is there like a number of trucks that you're wanting to add, or is there any examples that you can give of that? Thank you very much.
I'll start with the spot safety. So oftentimes it could be as a turn lane. It could be signalization. It could be ramp improvements on an interchange. Those are the types. Sometimes they can be even more minor than that, signage, striping. Often the issue is that when we have our federal safety funds, there is a gap in between what is allowable for the federal funds and what we may see on the ground. And then that becomes a challenge in us addressing. So hopefully that answers your question.
So I can address the help trucks quickly. We have a full breakdown of what that proposal includes. I'll be glad to give it to you. The short and sweet answer is it's coverage for everything that you saw and read on that map, and it's broken down into shifts, number of trucks, and all that. But I can get you that information.
Final question, Representative Renault.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Commissioner and TDOT team, for being here. I am curious, or I guess I'm surprised by the gas tax revenue being flat, given how many people have moved into Tennessee over the last few years. I'm curious if you have any consideration that perhaps some of that might be related to more people driving electric vehicles. And then if we do index the gas tax, will that mean that gas operated vehicles are going to be carrying a greater load of that we're not recouping from EV vehicle owners?
I'm gonna let Joe take this question, but let me deal with it briefly in large sense. And thank you for the question. The amount of electric vehicles in our state is still a very minute, like less than 2% of our total vehicle fleet, and so it's not a major issue. But 2 years ago, at the time that we passed the Modernization Act, there was more and more discussion, and so we wanted to make sure, at least as we dealt with that we put that indexing. And so we aligned the registration for electric vehicles with the same for combustion engine vehicles at the time. And so that was what we're looking forward from that standpoint. You want to talk a little bit more about the impact from a revenue standpoint?
Yes. So it's a very good question. But as Commissioner just pointed out, we have a very small roster of electric vehicles in the state. and it grows at about 10,000 per year. We're at about 36,000 right now. It's about a half of 1% of all the vehicles registered in the state. But again, we know it's going to migrate to either battery powered cars or hydrogen or whatnot. So again, it's why what you all passed last year with the indexing and the equivalent fee for the electric vehicles is so powerful. Why it's not growing up, again, the basic assumption right now is that we are increasing our vehicle miles traveled every year by 2 to 5%. It's just the cars are becoming more efficient, and that's really the reality of today.
Follow up?
Well, my vehicle does not seem to have that same. So maybe I need to look into another vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the end of our list. I do appreciate you being here, Commissioner.
I just like to say one final comment, Chairman, and that is same way I started, and that is to thank this body and this committee for its support and dedication for transportation in Tennessee, because we would not been able to provide this level of service that we are to our citizens. And we're always mindful of what you're trying to accomplish, and we're trying to accomplish it with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, all the staff members. Without objection, we are adjourned.